the rising price of oil is affecting every activity of modern life, and it's intensifying the drive to look for alternative sources of energy. Scientists believe that sunlight could provide 10,000 times the amount of energy needed to fulfill humanity's current energy needs. So why are we not doing more to harness it? Well, amongst other concerns, there's the problem of how to transport solar energy from where it's gathered to where it's needed. But now attention is moving to a simple technology that can generate huge amounts of clean energy from deserts. Concentrating solar power and its supporters believe it's the obvious big solution to the world's energy problems. Naomi Fowler's been investigating how deserts could hold the key to our energy problems.
According to the German Aerospace Centre, less than 1% of the world's deserts would be enough to fulfil current global energy needs using concentrating solar power technology. These deserts could provide the world with an endless supply of virtually carbon-free electricity, ensure a constant source of drinkable water to the world's driest areas, save billions of dollars, and could even alter current geopolitical realities. Polly Higgins of the Concentrating Solar Power advisory organisation TREC UK explains how it works.
Concentrating solar power is really what it says on the box. It's about concentrating the power of the sun. And how that's done is through the use of mirrors, obviously in a very hot place, so preferably in a desert. These mirrors are then placed on the desert. The sun then hits the mirrors, concentrates the power of the sun many hundreds of times, and is then directed either to a tower or to a tube that has liquid in it to allow that fluid to heat up to sometimes 300-400 degrees centigrade. Now, once you have a fluid reaching that type of temperature, of course, you create steam. And when you have steam, you can turn a turbine. And of course, once you can turn a turbine, you can generate electricity. At night time, you can now actually store electricity on molten salts, which allows for the generation of electricity both night and day.
Unlike nuclear power plants, these can be built in 2 to 3 years at a fraction of the cost. The European-based Trans-Mediterranean Renewable Energy Cooperation Group proposes that 2/3 of the power generated would go to local needs, with external sales of electricity to Europe via undersea cables generating a further income. The power stations can also be used as desalination plants to provide desperately needed supplies of fresh water, with the potential to regenerate vast areas of agricultural land.
Sicily is in the sun belt of the world, so it can be a good opportunity for Sicily to build this kind of plant for using a very large resources that we have here in Sicily.
Engineer Leonardo Merlo from Italian electricity company Enel, currently building Italy's first concentrating solar power plant, designed to augment an existing gas-fired plant in Sicily.
Moreover, this land under the certification is in the southern part of Italy, where, on the contrary, the solar radiation is very, very high, where the problem of a lack of drinkable water is very important. So I hope that after this first plant that will be built, it can be followed in the future more and more.
Un grande, affettuoso, grandissimo abbraccio a tutti voi, a tutti gli italiani che amano la libertà.
But the victory of Silvio Berlusconi in the Italian elections may change things. He wants to bring nuclear power to Italy, a policy that may dash hopes for more standalone concentrating solar power plants. It's political will, says Polly Higgins, that's key now. And there appears to be plenty of enthusiasm elsewhere in the Mediterranean region.
Certainly in the Middle East and North Africa, there is a growing momentum for concentrating solar power. There are already in North Africa various test plants in place. In Morocco, Algeria and Egypt, all of those countries are using these test plants as a kind of precursor before they start building larger plants after that. It's anticipated that the Middle East will build bigger plants, larger and faster,
Spain was quick to recognise the potential of concentrating solar power and now has a booming industry. Central to its remarkable growth has been the introduction of feed-in tariffs. Polly Higgins again.
We have legislation in place that favours our historic systems, which are essentially fossil fuel and nuclear. For any renewable technology to compete in that field, it needs assistance, and that assistance actually comes from new legislation that needs governmental support and intergovernmental support. And what that means is actually putting laws in place that ensure there is a legal obligation on utilities to take on energy that's created from renewable energies, and also that a good price for that electricity is guaranteed. This is where feed-in tariffs come into play, and that then creates investor confidence. Now, this has been so successful in Spain that they've discovered they've already reached their cap under their feed-in tariff 3 years early. Their cap was that they were allowed to build up to 500 megawatts, and it was expected that would be completed by 2010. They're already there.
But the European Union has so far left these decisions to individual governments. There's even talk of stopping feed-in tariffs altogether. Perhaps more than anything else, political will and investment from the European Union is needed to create a super-efficient high-voltage direct current network linking the Mediterranean belt to the EU, much of it under the sea. Energy expert Professor Keith Barnum of Imperial College London is both sceptical and positive.
I fear that these very powerful elements that one must be aware of are trying to slow things down. There is an existing nuclear industry there. It's a very strong lobby. There are obviously synergies if you've got a nuclear program. You need high-enriched uranium for warheads for powering the nuclear reactors of the submarines. And you need a lot of nuclear scientists to build your bombs. I did with colleagues a study of what happened to the plutonium from the UK civil reactors. And basically we've shown that all the low burn-up plutonium from the early years of the civil program in the UK, in the first generation reactors, went into the weapons stockpile. I'm just saying that sort of mentality is around that drove the first civil nuclear program in the UK. And I think one must certainly ask whether those forces are still out there pressing for a continuing program.
With these potentially really, really big projects that may or may not be funded by the EU, like the Clean Power from Deserts project, I'm just wondering how well equipped the EU is to set up these grand projects.
Well, what I would say is it's a very interesting question. There is this syndrome, I'm afraid, among some engineers and scientists that one must recognise of big is beautiful. And if the big is solar, that's great. But I would say let's go for smaller projects as well, in parallel perhaps. Big central ideas don't move fast, but small ones can. They can involve people. They can rise exponentially, like so many other big innovations. But the EU could be doing a lot more to stimulate it.
I would also like to launch an appeal to all the peoples in the Mediterranean. I'd like to tell them that we'll have to build together a Mediterranean Union, which will be a link between Europe and Africa. And what has been done for the Union of Europe 60 years ago, we're going to do so for the Union of the Mediterranean.
French Premier Sarkozy has enthusiastically pursued his vision of a union for the Mediterranean from the moment he was elected. Despite controversy and criticisms of paternalism and self-interest as France's motivating factors, the Union officially launches in July, with European Union support. Among other energy initiatives, this union is adopting the Clean Power from Deserts vision. Time will tell to what extent this union can provide the enormous political will and cooperation needed to think and act big. Polly Higgins again.
If the requisite backing that is so important is put in place at EU level, and the necessary updating and expanding of transmission networks, CSP will absolutely blossom, and we will see a rapid development of this market. It's claimed that fuel prices will increase even up to $150 per barrel by the end of this year. That would certainly make CSP economic in comparison. But it's the intergovernmental support that's so necessary, and the tying up with promoting good relations between Europe, Middle East and North Africa.
This is Naomi Fowler in London for Earthbeat.